title of our message is How to Pass God's Test. How to pass God's test. Who here like tests? Put your hand up. That's a cat. That's a cat. That's not true. You guys don't like tests, right? Nobody, right? Nobody really like tests, right? But the truth is, all of us have gone through some sort of test. For a lot of you here who are at uni, who are at high school, who are in high school, tests is part of your life. You have tests, probably every single 2 week, every single 3 week. It might not be a test. It might be an assignment. It might be an exam. It might be something else. But a test is part of your life if you're still in school. But even if you're not in school anymore, we still have tests at work, right? We still have tests at home. We still have tests that is related to family or other stuff. So it's something that test is something that we will face. Test is something that we will have. Test is something that we will experience. And I don't know. I think if we were to be honest here, nobody really likes tests. Especially the teachers that give us tests that are so hard, tests that are so difficult. We feel like they are so mean to us. We feel like they are so unloving toward us. We feel like they are giving us, all the unnecessary stress, all the unnecessary anxiety, all the unnecessary, trouble in our life. We feel like that. But, the truth is, tests is actually good for us. Because tests reveal what we know and what we do not know. Tests reveal what we need to work on, what we need to prepare, right? In the same way, when it comes to our spiritual life, when it comes to our relationship with God, when it comes to our journey with God, a lot of time we're going to see that God tests us. God would test our faith. God would test our trust. God would test, God would test us. And when God tests us, it is not because God is being mean to us, right? It is not because God is unloving toward us, right? It is not because God wants to give us more stress or more anxiety or more fear in our life, but it's actually the opposite. God tests us because He loves us. God tests us because He wants to help us to grow in our faith, to grow in our love, to grow in relying on Him. God tests us to reveal what we need to work on, to reveal what's in our heart, to reveal, to shape our heart. Maybe our heart have been, on something else. We shift our heart to something else, and God tests us to reveal to us that we need to put Him in the middle, to put Him in the center, to make Him the foundation of our life again. A.W. Tozer, he said this. He said, God never used anyone greatly until He tests them deeply. Right? And I think this is something that we see in the Bible, isn't it? Right? We see again and again that the people that God used the most are the people that God tests the most. The people that are the closest to God or the people that, they constantly have a test in their life. They constantly have a trial in their life, and it is because God wants to build something in them. It is because God wants to reveal something in them. So when God tests us, it's not to break us, but when God tests us, it's to shape us. It's to shape us into His image. It's to shape us into the people He called us to be. It's to shape us into, Christ's character and Christ's likeness. So what I want to do today is I want to look at 3 different passages that Muller have read out for us. And we're going to see what God is trying to teach us and how we can overcome those tests in our life. So the first passage, if you have your Bible, you can turn with me to Genesis chapter 22. In Genesis chapter 22, I'll read it out again. This is what we're told. Sometime later, actually, should we read this together? Let's read. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Right? So I'm pretty sure this is the passage that we all know. But what we see here is probably one of the most intense tests in the Bible. And the reason why it's such an intense test in the Bible here is because God is asking Abraham to give up what he loved the most. God is asking Abraham to give up who he loved the most, and that is his son Isaac, the promised child. And look at how God described Isaac in verse 2. God said, take your only son, whom you love, right? So it's almost like God is putting an emphasis. This is your legitimate son, right? This is the son that comes from Sarah, your wife. This is the son that you love so much. Yeah, that's the son, Isaac. That's the one that I want you to sacrifice. That's the one that I want you to give him to me. And when we look at this test, it kind of doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really make sense because Isaac was the promised child, Isaac was the one that God is going to use so that Abraham's family will be a great nation. Isaac was the son that God is going to use so that Abraham's family will be a great blessing, right? And not only that, but Isaac is a miracle baby. Right? Isaac, God gave Abraham and Sarah Isaac, right? It is impossible for Sarah to give birth, and yet God opened her womb and God gave them Isaac. And here God is asking Abraham to give him away. God is asking Abraham to sacrifice him. It does not make sense. And sometimes in our life, when God tests us, sometimes it doesn't make sense, Sometimes it doesn't make sense to us. Sometimes we don't understand what God is doing. Sometimes we even say to God, God, I thought this blessing was from you. God, I thought this is what you have given me. God, I thought this relationship was from you. God, I thought this job was from you. God, I thought this position was from you. God, I thought this gift was from you, and you're asking me to give it away. You're asking me to let it go. You're asking me to give it back to others. You're asking me to give it to other people. It doesn't make sense. God, I thought this was from you. And here, you're asking me to take it away. It does not make sense. But what we must understand is this, God was not trying to take Isaac away. God was trying to test. God was testing what was in Abraham's heart, or who was in Abraham's heart. Because you see, before Isaac was born, the person that Abraham loved the most was God. The person that Abraham relied on was God. The person that Abraham found his hope in and found his rest in was on God. But it seemed like when Isaac was born, it seemed like after Isaac was born, Abraham's heart has shifted and has moved from God to his son Isaac. It seemed like as if, it seemed like as if in Abraham's mind, the promise that God gave him, the promise of being a great nation, the promise of being a great name, the promise of being a great blessing, it seemed like in his heart, it seemed like in his mind, he's thinking, okay, Isaac will be the one that fulfill it. Before, it was God is the provider. God is the helper. God will sustain me. God is I rely on. Now it become my son Isaac will fulfill everything. My son Isaac will fulfill, the promises, will fulfill being great, will fulfill blessing. And this is what Tim Keller said. He said this. He said, if God had not intervened, Abraham would have certainly come to love his son more than anything in the world. If he did not already do so, that would have been idolatry, and all idolatry is destructive. And then in the rest of the book, Tim, he continued to explain like this. He said, if Abraham hope and trust and rely on was in his son Isaac, right? If Isaac become his main source of hope, if Isaac become the main thing in his heart, eventually Isaac will disappoint him. Isaac will fail him because Isaac is only human being and not God. You see, the truth is, if we put our hope, if we put our, all our identity, all our value, all our who we are, all of it in a person, they can never fulfill it because only God can. Only God can fulfill it. And so we see here is that in Genesis 22, if we continue to read, God is asking Abraham to, take his son and Isaac and offer it to him and sacrifice him. And we see that Abraham obeyed and Abraham trusted in God, and he went to the mountain and he was about to sacrifice Isaac, but then God provided a ram instead. And so sometime in our life, we might face tests that it doesn't make sense. Sometime in our life, the test that we might face is maybe God is asking us this question where, do you trust me more than the thing you love? And maybe the thing that God is asking us, maybe the question that we should ask ourselves is, what about us? Right now, at this very moment, who do we love or what do we love the most right now? If God were to come to us and speak to us today, what would God ask us to sacrifice? What would God ask us to remove from our heart so that He can be in the center again? What would that be? What would that be? What would that be for you, Levi? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to expose him, but, I don't know. Maybe for different people, it's different things, Some of us, maybe it's, our phone, our entertainment, So for some of us, it may be a relationship, A certain boy, a certain girl, that is not good for us. Or a certain boy, a certain girl that has been in our heart for way too long. And we kind of shift God, put God on the side. And God say, no, I want to be in the center of your heart. So you're going to remove that person, Maybe it's our future plan. It could be many, many things, But when God asks us to sacrifice those things and remove those things, are we going to trust Him? Are we going to, rely on Him? And so that's the first test that we see. So sometimes when God tests us, it doesn't make sense. And the second passage that I want to look at is in John chapter 6. So please turn with me to John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, the context of this is Jesus feeding the 5,000 people. Right? And here, what we're going to see is that sometimes God's test is impossible to pass. Sometimes God's test is impossible to pass. So in John chapter 6, people are following Jesus, and so many people are on the side of the mountain. And this is what we're told in verse 5 and 6. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? He asked this. He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. So here we see that out of everybody, out of all the disciples, Jesus ended up choosing Philip. It seemed like here Jesus looked at the crowd and maybe they look hungry. Maybe it's evening already and they need something to eat. And Jesus turned to Philip and Jesus said, all right, Philip, what are you going to do? All right, Philip, where are you going to buy bread? And verse 6, we are told Jesus asked this only to test him. But can we imagine being Philip right in this moment? How stressful it would have been. Jesus is asking you to buy bread, right? To buy food for like 5,000 plus people. And you're on the mountain, you're on the side of the mountain. There is no, restaurant nearby, and you don't have enough, you don't even have money because you left your job to follow Jesus, and now you're broke, right? You got no plan, and it almost seems like this test is setting you up for a failure. Have you ever had those tests before, where the teacher know that all the student is going to fail, but they give it to you anyway? All right? Yeah, it happened before, right? It happened in our life, It's like they know that we are going to fail a test, but they give it to us. Or it's one of those like last-minute tests or surprise tests. Nobody knows. Nobody can prepare. They come and they give us, and they know that we're going to fail, but they give it to. It seemed like that here. It seemed like that with Jesus and Philip and the test, but we're told in verse 6, Jesus already had in mind what he was going to do. Yes, Samuel. So I think what's happening here is that Jesus is not really looking for an answer in Philip. But what Jesus is trying to test him is, Philip, who will Philip rely on? Where will Philip go for the solution? Will Philip trust in God and say, Jesus, you're God, you feed them. Jesus, you're the Son of God, you feed them, Philip could have recalled, in the older day in Exodus, where God provided manna for the Israelite, where manna would rain down from heaven, and God was the one that is feeding his people. And Philip could have said, Jesus, you God, you can do that, just make it rain, make bread rain, or make fish rain, or make not pork, but lamb chop rain, and feed all these people, right? Philip could have said that, but how did Philip respond in verse 7? Philip answered him in verse 7. Philip answered him. It would take more than half a year wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. In other words, Philip responds by saying, Jesus, we don't have enough money. We don't have enough wages, right? And if we did have enough wages, if we did have enough money, we can buy those things, but it's only enough for one person to have a bite, so it's not enough. And then in verse 8 and 9, this is what we're told. Another one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaf and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? So here we see Andrew came to Jesus with the little boy, right? And this little boy have a lunch, This little boy have 5 loaves of bread, and this little boy have 2 little fish, and he offered it to Jesus, and Jesus was able to turn this offering and able to feed everyone. So I think the lesson for us here is this, sometimes God's test may seem impossible, but we got to know that he already have a solution. He already have the answer, And maybe what he is after in the first place, what he is after from us is just to trust him. He's just to rely on him. Or maybe what he is after from us, what he wants from us is the little things that we have and just give it back to him. Here, the little boy, he only have a little 5 bread and a little 2 fish, and maybe sometimes it's like that for us. We only have a little faith. We only have a little time. We only have a little gift. We only have a little certain amount of things. But you know what? Give those little things to God. Because sometimes when God tests us, what he is asking, sometimes when God asks us things, he's not asking us big stuff. Sometimes God is asking us just little stuff that he can use, little things that he can use, little time that he can use, little gift that he can use, little faith that he can use, like little things that he can use, and he can turn it and he can multiply it, right? And it will become not only a blessing for us, but a blessing for other people, right? So sometimes God's test may seem impossible, but we have to trust that he is the answer, right? He has the plan, right? He is, he have it all together, right? And the third passage that I want us to look at is James. So in James chapter 1, verse 2-4, this is what we're told. James said, "Consider it pure joy, my brother and sister, whenever you face trial of many kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So what James is telling us here is this. James is saying, when God is testing you, consider that as pure joy. Have you ever had a test and you consider it as a joy? All right? Right? You have a test and then, yes, I get to do the test. Yes, I'm ready for this test, right? So usually, when we have joy, usually, right, it's when we are prepared for the test, we go to it with joy. I remember when I was at uni, when I was doing engineering. One of the unit that I have to take was a unit that I've did for like 3 years. No, I did 2 years at TAFE. So I was very familiar with the subject. I was very familiar with, the calculation, and I was so, I didn't have to study because I learned at TAFE for like 2-3 years. So when that test come, like I went to that, I was so joyful, like I got this. And I actually did get a good mark out of it, right? But here, James is telling us not only testing, but he say when there is trial, right? I'll read out the NLT verse. The NLT version says this. It said, "Dear brother and sister, when trouble of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow." So James is telling us, when there are trials, when there are many trials of life, when there are many trouble of life, he said, not only when there are testing that come in your life, he said, consider that's an opportunity for you to have great joy. It's an opportunity for you to have great joy because, he said, your endurance has a chance to grow. Your endurance have a chance to grow. What does that mean? Well, we have to go back to who James is talking to here. If we look at the context, especially in the book of James, James is writing to a group of Christians that have to move out of Jerusalem. That they have to live in a different place. They have to live in a Gentile cities, in a Gentile country because of their faith. And because of their faith, they were persecuted. Because of their faith, they were mistreated. Because of their faith, there were times, because of their faith, some of them, they couldn't go to the marketplace and buy food, It's like not being able to go to Woolworth or not being able to go to, Kohl's or not being able to go to IGA because we are a Christian, right? Can you imagine that we're like, where are we going to buy food, IGA and Woolworth and Spa Shed and LD, that's the only place that sell food, right? So it's like that with the Christian. The marketplace was the only place that can buy food and meat and veggie. Where else are they going to go? And they were not allowed because of their faith. So there were so many trials and especially the slave, they were mistreated by their master. The poor and the woman, they would be mistreated by people that are rich and powerful. And James is telling them, yes, those trials and those testing, he said, consider as a testing from God to grow your endurance, to grow in your faith. Right? So in the same way, when God tests us and it seemed like it's too much, it seemed like it's overwhelming, right? It is because he is trying to grow us. He is trying to develop us. He is trying to strengthen us, right? He's trying to get us to rely on him. Yeah. I want to share with you like a short testimony of especially the past 3 months of my life. So the past 3 months, it felt like I went through testing the past 3 months. It was a testing at my workplace, and most of all, it was a testing from God, right? So toward the start of the year, one of the support coordinator, I think it was Simeon, focus. Simeon was the one that suggested. But she called me toward the end of last year or the start of the year. She called me. She was like, "Oh, okay. We are looking for someone. For a coordination role. We're looking for someone, and I think you'd be great at the role. So the first time she asked, I said nope. No, I like my support work. I like the flexibility. I like the fact that I can get day off very easily and no hustle. I like it. So I say no. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, she called me again. She was like, okay, where are you right now? I told her, oh, I'm at work. I'm with a client. I was like, all right, when you finish, I'm going to go see you. All right? And then when I finished, she came and see me, and she asked me about the job again, you know. And the thing with me is like, when someone asks me over the phone, I can say no very easily. But when someone asks me in person, it's so hard for me to say no, you know. Like I have like this honor, you know. I don't know how to say that. I honor them. So I'm very weak in person. So I just say yes, right? And so after saying yes, you know, I start the job. You know, it's more of a, you know, managing role, managing your client finance and the test, there was 2 tests, reflect on it, there were 2 tests that they have to face during the past 3 months. The first test was this. When I started the job as the coordinator at the office job, you know, the people at the office, right, they just come and they just congratulate me, you know. Like, hey, congratulations, you know. Hey, you made it, right? Hey, well done, hey, congratulations. And I don't know about you, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when people congratulate you like that, it kind of fill up your pride, right? It kind of fill up your pride, it kind of fill up your ego. So after hearing those compliments and those congratulations, in my heart, I feel like, okay, maybe I step up, you know. Maybe I level up, you know. Maybe I've gone up, you know. So for a little while, like that pride and that ego, it was like right there in my heart, right there in my heart. And the worst, and on top of that, you know, like because it's a new role, because it's a new position, and there's more to do, I don't have time for anything else. You know, I'm there at the office for like, you know, 8:30 to 4:30. I'm there at the office, you know. But when I was doing the support worker, I have so much free time. You know, in between my client, you know, I came to church and I prepared my sermon, you know. And when I have my client down south, you know, thank God, I go to God's No Church and I prepare my sermon in the God's No Church. You know, when my client are here, I'm not. I came here and I prepare my sermon during my breaks, during, you know, in between. So I had so much free time. But now that I'm at the office, you know, I didn't have any free time anymore, you know. And on top of that, you know, Friday, I finished work at 4:30. I'd go home, I took a shower, and I pick up all the youth, right? And on Friday, I see my kids for like 20 minutes, right? And then I came to youth, and by the time I get to youth, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired, you know. And after reflecting on it, I realized that, you know what, this is not good for me. Like, I don't want to serve God from a heart of tiredness, right? And that's my encouragement to all the youth leaders, you know. Don't serve God from a heart of tiredness, right? Your testing or your sacrifice might be not playing games until 3 a.m., you know. Somebody look at Tim and say, don't play games, all right? Or maybe something else, but I didn't want to serve God from a heart of tiredness. So, you know what? Like with all the status, right? With the, you know, like when I feel like, you know, like I level up, because, you know, Zoe mom actually saw me, you know. She was asking me, you know, she asked me, oh, where are your client? I was like, oh, I don't have a client. I work in the office now. And she was like, yeah, good, you know. That kind of feel something up in my heart, you know. And so after like reflect on it, you know what? Maybe I'll just go back to, you know, my old job. Maybe I'll just go back to support work. And I was able to overcome like the status, like the ego, like the move. I was able to overcome it so easily. But the next thing was harder. The next testing for me was like the financial side of things, you know. Yeah, sure, you know, it wasn't like a big increase of salary, but because it's an office work and there's only like 3 people in the team, so there's more chance for me to not get fired, you know, only 3 people, right? And most of my clients are Korean, and I'm the only dude that speaks Korean, all right? So they can't fire me, you know. They can't fire if I make mistake. They can't fire me. But with support workers, there's so many other support workers, and there's so many other Korean support workers. Maybe if they didn't want me, they could get rid of me very easily, you know. Then I thought about the financial side of things, and And if I was single, like it wouldn't be a problem, but now I'm not single anymore, you know. I got kids, I got a wife, you know, and they depend on my finance, you know what I mean? Like, so it was harder. And how did I overcome it? I overcome it by realizing that it is God that I have to trust. It is God that I have to trust. Because at the end of the day, the only reason why I got the job, like the only reason why I got the support worker job in the first place, it was because of God. I didn't have any qualification. I didn't have any experience, right? But I got the job. And with the office work, the reason why I was offered in the first place was because of God, right? I didn't have any qualification. I didn't have any experience, but God, right? But God did. God, provided the opportunity. So with the work thing, they sussed me out for like 3 months, all right? So January, February, March, April, the end of this. What month is this? May. So at the last week. So last week was the end of my 3-month contract, And they want me to stay on board. They want me to stay in the team. But I told them, I'm just gonna go back to support work, and I was very honest with them. I told them, this job is a lot of responsibility, and it requires a lot of my time and attention. And I told them I'm a pastor, like I have youth to look after, and that is my main responsibility. That's my main calling. So I need to have the flexibility, I need to have the time to study, to prepare, I need to have the time to rest and to come fresh, especially to serve you guys, So I rejected the offer, and so I just give me back the, support worker. I'm going to go back there, And so and it was hard. It was difficult. I'm going to tell you, it was hard. But I have to trust God, And then in the future, if God's willing, if my kids get older, maybe when my kids get older, if it come, it doesn't come, it's fine, And so the point that I'm trying to tell you is this, some of you might not have those kind of tests yet because you're still young, but your test, it might be different thing, Maybe especially for you that are in high school or for you that are in uni or TAFE, maybe the testing comes from peer pressure from your friend. It comes from, peer pressure from other people. Your friend is asking you to do things that would, compromise your faith. Maybe your friend might ask you to look at something. Your friends might want to take you some places where it might compromise your faith, where it might not grow in your faith, but decrease your faith, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's your, grade. Maybe, when you fail a test or when your grade is low and you feel anxious, you feel worried about your future, maybe there's a test and God is asking you to rely on Him. Maybe your test is that, you pray and you ask and maybe He doesn't give you the answer straight away and He wants you to wait. Maybe that's a testing for you. Maybe maybe God is asking you to forgive someone, or God is asking you to serve or to wait on Him, and maybe that's your test, But whatever it is, whatever test it is, trusting Him is the way. So how do we pass God's test? Number one, we obey God even when it doesn't make sense. Right? God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. It doesn't make sense. Right? Sometimes things happen in our life, it doesn't make sense. But we have to obey God even when it doesn't make sense. Sometimes we have to give God what we have, even if it's just small things. Maybe God is just asking just small things, and give Him the small things. And the third thing is maybe, trusting Him through trial. Trusting Him through trouble, trusting Him. And consider the testing as a joy. There's a joy that will grow, our perseverance. There's a joy that will grow our trust. I was actually, before considering with the job, the whole thing, I was talking to Pastor Samuel about it, before I consider going back, I was battling, and I was talking to Pastor Samuel about it. And one of the things that he said was that, like, there's always going to be tests in our life. Like when you're young, when you're Samuel age, your test might be, not playing games, not looking at your phone too much. Your test might be just focusing on your studies, focusing on getting your grades up, Maybe that's your testing. Maybe when you get older, like Salah's age, or Abby age, or Muller age, right? Maybe your test might be, all right, okay, or team age, all right, now that I'm a young adult, okay, who am I going to marry? Who's going to love me? Who's going to be my future husband, my future wife, right? Just like Chura, before she got a boyfriend, she was so stressed, and who am I going to date, It's another level of testing. And then when you become a parent, it's another level of testing, All right, am I like treating my child right? Am I parenting my child right, Am I treating them right? And then when they get older, you worry, or are they going to have, when they go to high school, are they going to have the right friends, Are they going to be surrounded by good people? Are they going to be smart? Are they going to get a good grade? And, when they're at uni, are they going to, pass their uni? And when they pass, are they going to find a successful career, And then when they get to become a young adult like Salah's, are they going to find the right wife? Are they going to find the right husband? Are they going to find a wife or a husband that will lead them to Christ? Is another level of testing. And then when you get older and become a grandparent and your health is declining, your testing is, now, When I was younger, I rely on myself. When I was younger, I can go wherever I go. I can eat and I can cook, and now I have to rely on my kids. Now I have to rely on my grandkids. Now I have to rely on other people to feed me, to take care of me. The older we get, it's a different level of trusting. But I want to encourage, especially the young people in this room, what I want to encourage you is this. When you're young and when God tests you, and when you keep on choosing God, when you keep on trusting Him, when you keep on relying on Him, the older you get, the harder the test, but because you have been relying on Him for so long, because you have been trusting Him on so long, because you have been, relying on His promise for so long, it's no longer hard for you to say, it's no longer hard for you to say no when you need to say no. It's no longer hard for you to say yes when you need to say yes. Amen? Can I invite the worship team to come on, please? So all of us, we will all experience, some sort of testing. But those testing are for our good. Those testing are to grow us. Those testing are to become more like Jesus Christ.